Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Daphne Richards, Travis County Horticulture Agent with the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Thank you for joining us for this webinar and our Drought to Deluge Gardening Series. We have a great program lined up for you today: Homeowner Landscaping Plans, Site Documentation and Analysis. Our presenter today is Sandy Stone. Sandy is a graduate of the University of Texas with a Bachelor of Science in Interior Design and a Master's in Architecture. As a partner with the Heimseth Architects, she specializes in historic preservation. Sandy has lived and gardened in Austin for over 50 years and has been a Travis County Master Gardener since 2019. Sandy uses her skills to create unique garden spaces that blend and enhance the native landscape of Austin. I've worked with Sandy to design new sections in our extension demonstration garden, and I'm excited to share her expertise with you today. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature to type them in, and we'll answer them as time allows. Sandy, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Daphne. I'm going to share my screen now. Welcome, everyone. And I would like to thank Daphne and Cheryl and Kirk and Mindy for all their help with me this morning. I couldn't have done it without them. Today, I'm going to provide you with a lot of information that will enable you to prepare to do a landscape design. Most of this information is applicable to no matter what size your project is, whether you're doing your entire site or one small area. It will help you create a garden that is attractive, sustainable, and useful. So the first thing we're going to talk about is creating a master plan for your garden. You have to determine where you want to end up before you can figure out how to get there. And the master plan helps you do this. It'll help you determine a vision and provide guidelines to create that vision. And it's a step-by-step process that helps you organize all the information you gather so that you can end up with the garden that you envisioned. It helps you set goals to create a cohesive end result. If you've set the goals properly, you can help yourself stay on track and not get sidetracked. Oops, sorry. Let me back that up. It keeps mistakes to a minimum because there's an end plan. It can keep you from making impulse decisions that you later regret or have to redo because you didn't have your final goal in mind. It helps you find opportunities and define limitations. By looking at your entire site and studying it with new eyes, you often see things you never noticed before. Sometimes there are things that could be wonderful if presented correctly, and sometimes there are things you realize, oh, that really needs to go. And one of the things that is really important for you to know is that you really have to spend as much time planning and designing as you do as implementation and construction. So what we're going to talk about today is documenting the existing conditions and creating a plan and a layout of your property, photographing your existing conditions, gathering code and zoning informations. And then in the second part, we'll be talking about site analysis, where we'll take all the information that you've gathered during site documentation and begin to analyze those conditions, define opportunities and limitations, determine your zoning restrictions and locate easements and utilities, and organize this information by putting it all on your plan and begin to explore your wants and needs. And next week, we'll be talking about the part that I think is really fun, design, and then implementation and construction. So in order to get started, you need to gather some materials and tools. You'll need to obtain a copy of your survey or plat. These are usually available if you're a homeowner. When you purchased your home, a plat was probably done of your property, so you should have a copy of that in your closing documents. or if you've built your home, you often have a survey that you can use as your base. You'll also need to gather tools. I like to use 11 by 17 grid paper. You can buy it, it's available at local office supply places or, Miller Blueprint. Then you'll need a 25 or 35 foot tape. I recommend using the heavy duty wide ones that are stiff so that you can use it, especially if you're measuring by yourself. And then a 100-foot tape measure is also very helpful to have. You'll need to make multiple copies of your plat or survey. You'll need pencils and a good eraser, because believe me, you'll use it, at least I do. Red, blue, and black pens for different things that you'll be marking on the plan. Colored pencils and markers, a thin black Sharpie marker, and a camera or your cell phone for photographs, an architectural and engineering scale, which I'll talk about more in just a moment, clipboards, and if possible, a buddy to hold the other end of the tape as you're measuring. So this is an architectural scale. This allows you to actually use the measurements that you take on site and put them on a piece of paper that's manageable to be used. So when a drawing is to scale, it is in the same proportion as the real thing. This shows an 1/8 inch scale. So every 1/8 of an inch on this ruler equals 1 foot. And you can see that the ruler is laid on the corner of the house. It's lined up with the corner of the house here. And if you go down to this end, it shows that this mark between the 44 and 46 that says 24 is actually 45 feet. There are 2 scales on this side. If you start at the other end of the scale, it's a 1/4 inch per foot. But you've got to come from this end and go this way, and it's 45 feet. And you can use that to measure anything on this drawing. For example, the door starts at 3 feet and it goes to 7 feet. So it's showing, it starts at 4 feet and it goes to 7 feet. So it's a 3-foot wide door. And you can move the scale around and measure. Let me see. Oh, and I also wanted to note there are multiple architectural scales. So depending on the size of your site, you'll decide what size you need to use, because these scales are architectural scales and they tend to be bigger. And so you'll have a larger drawing, which is better to work on when you're doing small detail stuff. Engineering scales are what is used on most surveys. And so a lot of surveys will be at 1:20 or 1:30. Oh, and also there's a really good tutorial that I'm putting on the resource list to show you how to use a scale. That was a pretty quick explanation. So this is a photograph of a plat. It shows the location of the building on your site. And it shows the drives and the walk. There's a walk in the right-of-way here, all the way around the property. It shows the property line, which is this dark black heavy line here that goes all the way around. It shows easements, which is this area here, and right-of-way. This is actually right-of-way. There's an easement on the back here. This is a public utility easement that's 7.5 feet wide from the back of your property line in. And then it also shows building setback lines. This house happens to be on a corner. So you have streets on 2 sides. The front property is actually the setback line. The building line is 25 feet back. And on the side, it's 15 feet. And there will be, on this side, there's usually a 5-foot setback line. Now it varies from zoning to zoning, but here it looks like it's 5 feet. And then there'll be a setback line on the back of the property, which is 10 feet. And that tells you where you can build structures. You can't build beyond that. Although On this one, they do allow you to put there. I'll show you that in a minute. And then it'll show you utility locations. There's a manhole here, and there's a legend right here that shows you the different codes. There's electric, gas, water, TV, and things like that. Electric manhole, that's what this is right here. And it will also show you the north arrow, so you know which way is north, which is very handy to have. Plats don't normally show locations of trees or planting beds, and they don't typically have a scale on them. So you have to do some things to get it to scale. This is a copy of a survey, and this is actually my property where I live. And as you can see, this is at a scale of 1 to 30. So it's a much larger piece of property. It's almost 2 acres. And it shows similar things. It shows the property line all the way around here. It shows the location of the one building on the site, which is the house right here. And it shows the drive that comes into the site and goes around the house. It's kind of light, but it does go all the way around. It shows there's an easement across the back, a drainage easement, and there is another easement along this side of the property as well. That plat or surveys often also show other features, like all of these numbers indicate the large trees on the site. They're trees that are more than 20 inches in diameter, and they each have a number by them, and there's a legend to the side that tells you what size the tree is and what type of tree it is. It also shows the north arrow, which is here, and it has a graphic scale. So if you lay a scale on this, you can tell graphically what the length is, and you can use that to scale the drawing up or down. A lot of surveys have grades on them, and this one didn't happen to, so I added this little insert here. It shows you the grading on the property, which is basically the slope of the land. And this happens to be a fairly steep site. And the main thing you need to know about this is that this line is 583 feet above sea level, and it kind of goes around this way and around this way. And then 584 all the way up to 588. So that shows you that this is climbing, the site is climbing in this direction. And if you look at this area right here where the lines are closer together, that shows you that there's more slope and it's much steeper here. So this is a little bit flatter, although it's still got a pretty good slope on it, but this is much steeper. And that's the main thing you need to recognize with grading if you actually have grades on your property. So as I mentioned, the reason I talked to you about the scale earlier is you want to take this, your plat or your survey, and blow them up to a scale that you can measure. Now, for instance, this wall of the house is 22 feet long. So using a copier, I took the scale, I kept blowing it up. I blew it up 25%, then I blew it up 50. And I was able to get this so that when I laid a scale on it at 1/8 of an inch, this was 22 feet long, which tells me I can measure other things on this site accurately. So what I did was I sketched in important features like the fencing, which was not shown. And I put in the gates. I used a red pen on this because otherwise it's kind of hard to see things. I located all the trees that were on the site. You can see these. And I just showed them roughly where they are. I indicated planting beds. There's one here along the side of the house and one in the back. Everything else is lawn. There's a large existing patio here. I also showed where the doors and the windows are to the house so that I know as I'm doing my design and my analysis, I know where I want to put things so that they don't block windows. And then there are no retaining walls on this site. Oh yeah, there's a storage building that was added back here. So you want to show that and measure it. There don't happen to be any retaining walls on this site, but if you do have one, you want to know where that is. So on my site, I had the survey, but it was extremely small. The original was on a 32 by 30 by 42 inch sheet of paper, and it was just too unwieldy to work with. So I took a piece of grid paper, that 11 by 17 grid paper, and sketched the area around the house where I wanted things to be, where I wanted to locate things. And I used the grid line. I knew the size of the house from the survey, so I was able to draw that accurately. And then I sketched everything approximately where it was. And I located the trees that I had within this small area around the house. And I located the propane tank and the overhead or the screened-in porch that goes over the driveway and the 2 columns that support it, and the AC, hose bib, and hose bib. And this sketch doesn't have to be perfect because you're just sketching it so that you can do your dimensioning on it. And then this is the actual drawing where I did the actual dimensioning of the house and went out and measured it. And these drawings don't have to be pretty. They just have to be legible enough so that you can read them. So there, I dimensioned the house first, and then I used the wall of the house. I took a straight line out from that wall and measured from it to the individual trees. And I'll show you that in more detail. So this is what your field drawing is going to look like when you get finished. And it's not, as I said, it's messy. It doesn't have to be pretty. So this is a close-up of how you do the dimensioning. You set up baselines from fixed points, usually the corners or the walls of the house. You measure from the wall a string line or a straight edge, and you measure to the center line of plants and trees, including the trunk diameter and canopy. So for instance, this live oak right here is a 24-inch diameter live oak. And I've measured to the center line of that from this wall of the house. So I know where this is, and I know where this wall is. And so by measuring from that, I can locate this tree accurately. So with individual dimensions, which these are, you measure from this corner to this corner, and you write the dimension here. Then you measure from this corner to the edge of this circle, and that's your dimension here. With running dimensions, you start with this corner of the house, and I often just lay out my 100-foot tape right along this edge here, right along through here. And especially when I'm doing it by myself, and I can measure. So this dimension, this 1'4" is 1'4" from the 0 line. This one is 2'4" from the 0 line. So you can walk down along beside your 100-foot tape, and you can just look and measure each one, and they all go back to this 0 point. Same way this direction. This wall is the 0 point, and it's 3'7", 5'9", and 6'10". And that way I don't have to be walking back and forth. I can do it all at one time. So I've gotten all the dimensions, I've gathered them up, and I've put them on a plan, and I've laid out a new plan that is accurate to what I was doing from what I had drawn before. So this is going to be the base plan for everything else I do, because I'm going to focus on this area of the site, and I'm going to go from here. So the next thing in site documentation is photographs. You can never take too many photographs. I have worked on a lot of projects over my years as an architect, and a lot of them are out of town, and it never fails that I'll take hundreds of photographs and I'll get back to Austin and I'll be working on a project and I'll need a photograph that is a foot over from where I actually took the photograph. So I've learned to take as many photographs as I possibly can, and I take them from all different angles so that you can see all the different features. For instance, these trees were located on my plan and it shows the base of the trees right here. But what it doesn't show is that these trees curve out and lean over and really take up a lot of space. It also shows interesting things like, okay, there's these sculptures here. I didn't locate those on the plan. It just shows the photographs are used to help you look at things. And it helps you document things that you want to change and things that you want to move. Another part of documenting your site is figuring out what you have to do as far as city and code requirements. Hold on just a second. The city of Austin has a really great website, and you're able to get on there and look at a lot of things. If there are any setback requirements on your property, that'll be based on your zoning. So you'll need to check your zoning so you know what that is. And there are height limitations for fences and buildings in different zoning areas. So you'll need to check on that. You don't want to end up building an 8-foot tall fence only to find out that you can only build a 6-foot tall fence. Another important thing is impervious cover. A lot of zoning areas in the city of Austin have limitations on how much impervious cover you can have. And impervious cover is cover where water will not drain into the ground. So decks, your house, buildings, anything that's a hard surface, sidewalks, driveways are impervious. So a lot of places limit that coverage. So you'll need to know what that is. So you'll know whether you can add a patio, for instance. And also you'll need to check on code and safety requirements for pools and spas. Most places require that they be covered or have a fence around them. Open burning restrictions for fire pits. You'll need to know that if you're going to put in a fire pit. And any code requirements for structures that you're going to build. If you want to build a greenhouse or a storage shed or an outdoor kitchen, all of those things will require building code. They'll have building code requirements. Another thing you need to check is tree ordinances. Do you have large trees in your yard? And if you are planning on taking down a tree, there are probably some hoops you're going to have to jump through in order to do that. So you need to check with the city about that. Historic preservation ordinances. If you're in a historic district or you're a contributing structure or you have a historic home, there may be some requirements regarding fencing and structures. And then you'll also have to go to the permit department if you're going to build fences or do retaining walls above a certain height, and then other garden structures and electrical work. And also, I just wanted to mention that the City of Austin has a really great website for landscape design. So you can take a look at that. And then you'll also need to check with local utility companies if you're going to be doing any kind of utility work, or adding a pool or a spa, or and if you have something in the right of way, you can call Austin One Call Service, and they will locate your utilities in the right of way. They will not locate utilities on your property, so you'll have to get a private utility locator, and you can look those up on the web. There are several listed on the web for this area. And this is really important if you're going to be doing a bigger project. And then the last thing that group that you'll need to check with is if you live in a neighborhood that has a neighborhood association or a homeowners association, they're going to have the right to review your drawings and your plans of what you want to do, and then give you the yay or nay on whether you can do what you want to do. And they're mostly concerned with things that affect views, mutual privacy, and quiet, sunlight, and airflow. So do we have any questions?
All right. Thank you, Sandy. So everyone, will give Sandy a quick break. And if we have one question in the chat. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to take a 3-minute break. It's 10:27. So we'll start back promptly at 10:30. All right, we're back and we have a couple of questions, but before we launch into those, I want to let you guys know that if you see any websites or any references in the presentation, you will be sent those in the follow-up email that we'll send after the presentation. You'll be sent a list of resources and links to those websites and a link to the recording of this presentation. So if you don't catch a website, don't stress out too much about it. We'll send it to you afterwards. Okay, Sandy, we just have a couple of questions, and the first one is there a place where I can find a list of permits that the City of Austin requires?
Yes, if you go to the City of Austin Development Services, I believe there is a list, and go to the residential section. They, on the website, then they should have a list of all of the permits that would be required.
Okay, and last question for this first part, and may refer back to next week. Do you have to plan for sunlight and shade areas?
Absolutely. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the next section that we're doing today, but we'll really talk about that more during the design phase. So yes, definitely, because different things are going to grow in sun and shade. So
great advice. Okay, everyone, if we didn't get to your question, or if you think of one as we talk along, go ahead and just type it in while Sandy is speaking, and it will wait there for her, and we'll get to those questions at the end. All right, well, let's get back to the program. Take it away, Sandy.
okay. Okay, now we're going to switch to site analysis, and this is a sketch, one of the sketches I did, documenting the existing items I wanted to keep or relocate on my site. And as you can see, we have lots of large trees, and I have some pieces of sculpture, and then which are shown here and here and here. And then right here along the edge of the drive, I had all of these boulders, limestone boulders that were that were there, and I wanted to keep those and reuse them. They were all harvested off the site here, and so I wanted to keep that as part of my design. So I showed those, and then we'll use those. I'll use those in my design later. I also had just very few plants that were available here, because this house had been built for 2 years when I came here, and my partner who built it was not a gardener. And so what I had was a lot of mature trees and very few plants. There are some twisted leaf yuccas. These are all natives that were here. Twisted leaf yuccas. He did have a friend who planted some American agave americanas here, and some iris here, and a few aloes. But other than that, there were no plants on this site other than the big trees. You can see that this house is unusual in that all of the living area is on the second floor. So I've located the second floor windows, and I've shown which ones have views out of them, which is just about all of them. And then the screened-in porch has views, in 3 directions, and it's also on the second floor. And there's a really long view out this way towards the back of the property where it's screened by large cedar, ash junipers. There were lots of wild areas where it had not been cleared, and I wanted to leave those in place. And then there was a view to this direction that I really wanted to block from the neighbor. So those are kind of the things that I documented. And so I did that, and I did multiple other drawings, and then I since locating and showing different things. So this is the synthesis of that. And so what you do with this site analysis is, again, you have your easements and your setbacks, which for this one, there actually aren't any restrictions. The existing trees and vegetation, which I had shown on the previous one. I noted the soil type and depth. It's 3 to 6 inches of topsoil over caliche and limestone. And for those of you who don't know, caliche is broken up limestone that sort of gets mixed in with the topsoil. So it makes a really rocky kind of material that's really hard to dig. And then there are lots of rocky outcroppings and native limestone. Sloped areas of the property, there really isn't a lot of slope. There's just a little bit of a dip here along the driveway that kind of created a drainage way so that when it rains, water runs off here and it kind of pools in this low area here. Typically, the site drains to the southwest. And someone asked the question about sun and shade. So I've located the sun areas on this piece of property, which are these 3 areas right here. Those are the only sun areas on the entire piece of property. Everything else is shade. So I have an abundance of shade. I also located the direction of the site entry. So most people who come into the site drive down the driveway and they come into this area from this direction. Showed wind patterns. Austin, this is typical for almost all sites. The prevailing breeze is out of the southeast in the summer when there is a breeze. And in the winter, it's out of the northwest, typically. And that's usually only when we're having a norther blow in. Then I noted the architectural style of the house, which is a 3-story with stucco base and hardy plank siding. And as I said, the whole first floor is shop space and garage, and upstairs is the living area. And then the 3rd floor is a loft, and then there is a roof deck on top of that. So it's a very unique house. Unique landscape features were the trees and the native limestone rock that was available in abundance here. Views, good and bad. As I mentioned before, we had a great view to the back of the site. And then all of the house windows look out into the canopy of these trees. So it's sort of like living in a greenhouse. We do have a view this direction that we wanted to block from the neighbor. and private and public areas. The utility area of the site is over to the north of the house, on this side where we have our storage shed and some outdoor storage, and our rainwater tanks are over here as well. But they're further away, so they're not on this drawing. Um, and then all of this is public area. And once you drive into the site, this is what you see. It's all open to anybody who comes in. And then I noted the wildlife, because if you garden in Texas, you know that you have to deal with wildlife if you live out from the center of the city. And the biggest problem we have here are deer and armadillos. We also have raccoons, possums, skunks, occasional fox. We have lots of wildlife here, not to mention all the snakes and lizards and other things. So this is the basis that allows you to begin looking at the design of your property. But first, I'm going to talk to you about another a water conservation strategy that has been developed that seems to be really helpful and useful in our area where we have drought and deluge. This is called Hydrozones, and this is a moisture management system. It's a way to manage your irrigation. So it uses plants that have similar water requirements in the same area, and it encourages the use of native and adapted plants. It provides for effective budgeting of irrigation water and will impact the design and implementation of your plan. It notes that turf requires more frequent watering than trees and shrubs, which require deep watering but less frequently than turf. So you break your landscaping into high water use zones. That one, you want to consider minimizing those areas and keeping them in high visibility areas. So I designated the high water use zones to be close to the house where I could keep an eye on things. And this area here is where one of the few places I have sunshine on the site. So I wanted to put in a vegetable garden in this area. And this is the area where you include all plants that have high water use needs or regularly water use needs. Then the second zone is the moderate water use zone, and that uses plants that require occasional watering once established. And so this area along this drainage channel that I pointed out is a moderate water use zone where the plants get watered less frequently. Also out here, there's more native vegetation under these trees, and so it gets watered less frequently as well. And it's only applied to the extent necessary to keep the plants healthy and flourishing. These areas get irrigated once every 2 weeks or so. And this parts of this area don't get watered at all. And then low water use zones, once established, these plants need no additional water. And you can see those are even further out from the house. They are areas that are sort of semi-native and have lots and lots of local native plants in these areas. And these are plants that when I plant here, I plant things that are need to be watered their first year, but after they're established, they don't need water. And then they need to be watered during a drought. And then we have the low water use zone, which is out here in the more wild area where I don't water at all, except very, very occasionally when I'm starting something new. So during the site analysis, you need to look at the plantings that you have in your area and consider which plants work well with the soil and water and light conditions, and look at the native vegetation in your area or close by to get an idea of what grows well. You know, here, of course, I had the native live oaks, cedar elms, ash juniper, Texas persimmon, possum haw. All of those things were growing here when I came to the site. So um, it was, it was a foregone conclusion that all of those would stay for me. And, I also, I found agarita, um, and several yuccas, twisted leaf yucca, um, mountain laurel. There was a mountain laurel. So there was some native vegetation here, but it was all, and so I started looking around at what grows in this area. And it's going to be different depending on where you are in Austin. If you're on the east side of Austin, you're going to have different plants very often than you have on the west side. Consider water availability. How much water do you have available to you? We're on a community well, so very often in the summer, we don't have any water to spare for landscaping. So I had to consider how to deal with that. We put in rainwater collection tanks in order to deal with that. Consider deer and wildlife. I've had to learn how to garden with deer. When I lived in the middle of Austin, I didn't have to worry about deer. So I had to learn how to garden with deer. And you want to consider the birds and the pollinators. And so I planted things that are that support wildlife, and I provide housing for them and water. So this slide sort of starts stepping into design, but these are some questions I'd like you to consider and ask yourself next week before we start into the full-blown design portion of this. So I suggest that you look at lots of gardens and take lots of photographs and look at lots of photographs of gardens that you do like. These are just a couple of gardens that I visited that I really liked the things in them. And then also when you go to the nursery and you see things that you like, this picture that I took of the peace poles at Natural Gardener, that I love the peace poles and I wanted to add some of those to my garden. So I photographed them years ago before I ever had one. And I started looking at, can I incorporate these things into my garden? I had seen this sculpture of this horse, this rusted iron horse at a garden in Colorado that I visited. And I thought, that's really wonderful. And I thought, well, I've got rusted sculptures in my garden. This is a really great way to present them. And so I have done the same thing at my garden. Can you blend different styles that you like into your garden and create a cohesive design? And the answer is yes. There are no hard and fast rules. But we'll talk about that a lot more next week on how you can do that. Blending the native plants with adapted plants and plants that you want to use. And then another question that I think is really important for you to start looking at are your must-haves. Do you need a lawn area for children? Do you need and or pets? Do you need a vegetable garden? Do you want to have a place for wildlife? All of the questions that are really important to you, so that you can start thinking in terms of what do you really want in your garden and what do you want it to look like. So this is a synthesis of the everything that I've gathered. And then the beginning of the layout is kind of what architects call a bubble diagram of how I want things to sort of work on my site. And it's kind of offset because this is a piece of tracing paper over that original sketch that I did showing the different areas of the garden. For example, there's one sun area right here that you can see kind of lightly shown through the tracing paper. So I located my vegetable garden here. And I knew that because well, I have a issue with deer here, I would have to have a fence around that garden. And so I'm showing that here. Um, and then I located the shade beds where I knew that the only things that plants there needed to be happy in the shade. Oops, sorry. And then I did a showing where paths needed to be located in the garden. You want to begin to organize your garden so that you can create uh, a synthesis of the things that have a base to them. Um, there's a seating area here, so you come out the front door. You can sit, or you can walk around through the garden and on multiple paths. I've put the compost area over here close to the vegetable garden, kind of where it's hidden by the trees and the undergrowth here. And I want to create a drainage way here to keep the natural flow going. And I want to create more of a water detention to hold water for maybe a day or so after a big flood event. I created a spot here for my grandchildren to play because this is all shade. I knew it couldn't be a lawn. So this is just a large mulched area where they can play. And I'm leaving the native and wild areas wild here in these areas. So that's kind of the synthesis of my plan for the site analysis and the beginning of design. And I think, yeah. So any questions?
All right. Thank you, Sandy. You know, the one class that I really regret not making time for in my college coursework is landscape design. So it's a real hole that I have in my background. And no matter how many times I hear a presentation like this, I pick up new and useful information. Most people, including me, skip right over this tedious structural work and jump right into the fun and exciting part, which is plant selection. We really need to slow down and make a plan first. After this week, many of us will have an opportunity for a reset in sections of our freeze devastated landscapes. So I'll definitely use what I learned from you today, and I'm looking forward to your presentation next week. All right, it's time for a few questions. We have quite a few in the chat, so we'll try to get to them all here. One very simple one to start off. The circles where you've drawn the trees, is that the current canopy or the mature canopy as it will be in the future?
Well, for me, that is the mature canopy because those trees are all mature. However, if you have new trees, I would encourage you to draw the canopy as it will be, say, in 5 to 10 years, because that's going to affect what you want to plant around those trees.
So planning for long term, instead of drawing the canopy as it is now, draw it and the mature size that it will be.
Right.
Advice.
Right.
Okay, where can one get a copy of the graphic scale version of your plat survey if it doesn't show that? If your current plat survey doesn't show the graphic scale?
If your plats typically don't show that, so you might be able to go back to the original surveyor, and their name is usually on the plat, and request that from them. Barring that, if you can't get that, then I would take it and to a copy machine and blow it up to a scale. And that takes some trial and error to do, but in the long run, it really benefits you to spend the time and the effort to do that, to get it to a known scale. And you just have you have to blow it up, I would say 25% the first time, and try and measure and see if you've gotten it anywhere close to the actual size of the drawing. So take a known dimension like the length of one wall, and blow it up until that wall measures 22 feet. And then you'll know that you've got a drawing that's to scale, because it is drawn to scale. It's just that it's not to a scale that you can use to measure usually on a plat. Surveys are different. They will be to a scale normally.
Okay.
Is that helpful? I'm not sure that I'm explaining it well.
I understood that. So
Okay.
if the person who asked the question didn't understand it, we'll follow with them later.
Okay.
Next question, is an ETJ area subject to city requirements?
Some of them, yes. But there are a lot of things that you don't have to deal with an ETJ that you do have to deal with in the city. I know one thing that really is not in effect in the ETJ is the tree ordinance. But you'll just have to check and see. You can get into issues in that area because it's kind of a gray area, and so it's not really clear. But so it's really wise to check in with the city of Austin to make sure what the requirements are in the ETJ.
Okay, next question. How do you plan for rain barrel locating? How do you incorporate those into a design and not just as a utilitarian afterthought?
Well, there are various ways to do it. I had a photograph of one of mine. It's just a small collection that I use to hand water plants. So you can incorporate it. We had I had a very nice urn that was designed as a rain barrel, and I used a rain chain to gather water off of one roof off of the house. So it can definitely be incorporated into your design if you have the proper urn. I also have two 2,500 gallon storage tanks, and they're set back in the trees where they're hidden, where you can't see them. And that's a whole much more complicated process because you have to have a pump and you have to dig up, dig a line to them and set up all kinds of piping and things for that. But yes, it definitely can be incorporated. And we'll talk about that more next week.
Great. Yeah, those aesthetic things will be more a part of next week's presentation. What way of collecting and organizing inspirational photos and ideas have you found work best for you in order to refer to them later when you are seeking inspiration?
Well, I have all of my photos digitally, most of us do. And so I have an album in my photos that I put those drawings in, and I try to put them in. Okay, this is from my trip to Colorado. This is from my trip to Florida. This is from my trip, or this is somebody in the neighborhood, locating something that I saw in a garden in the neighborhood that I really liked, or on a garden tour. So I organize mine that way in my photos, which is what I had done for this presentation. All of these photos are things that I've taken over the last 15 years. And, they're located that way so that I can find them easily and quickly.
And so how about things on the internet that you might find? Do you use Pinterest, for example, or something like that to collect photos that you might come across on the internet?
Yes, I have done that as well. So I don't know a whole lot about it, but I do that.
Yeah, and I think different photo organizing tools work. It's kind of what resonates most with you personally. You have to try a few tools out. I've not yet found one personally that works very well for me, so I just kind of have to take a stab. And often I may know I have a photo and can't find it when I need it, so I have to run out and take a new one for whatever media purpose that I have. So it's something that we all struggle with for sure. What does ETJ stand for?
Extra, let's see.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly either.
It's jurisdiction.
Jurisdiction, and it's outside the city limits.
Right.
I do know that. So
it's just the area right outside the city limits that the city controls.
Yes, but I can't remember what the letters stand for either. But
Yeah.
but we could look that up. Extraterrestrial jurisdiction. Thanks, Pat.
Extraterritorial jurisdiction. That's
Yes.
it. Yeah, I think that's it.
All right.
I
Next
think there's
question.
a couple of other people on here who might know that.
Yeah. Someone typed it in for us. Thank you, crowd control out there. Okay. Next question. Where can one find grade maps for the terrestrial grade?
For the grades?
Yeah.
I think Miller Blueprint used to have them, but I don't know if they're still available. I could do some research on that and let y'all know next week if I can find anything that's available as a general grade map. There may be something available.
And the Natural Resource Conservation Service with the USDA has in their web soil survey, if you go to that and you do, the USDA has surveyed all of that, and they may have some stuff. I don't know if it would include residential, because probably residential areas have been graded differently than maybe they have done. Maybe it is, since they did those surveying. So that is a good question that we'll have to look into. Last question. What water use category would turf fall into when we're talking about hydrozones?
I think it probably would be in the high water use zone, because it's going to need to be irrigated regularly. So I think it'd be high water use zone.
So Chris, who asked that question, I would say that when we talk about hydrozones, we don't generally lump turf in with any of that, because we're talking about all plants except turf. Talking about xeriscaping, locating high water use plants closer to your home so that they're easier to water more often, and lower water use plants away further from the water source potentially. So when we talk about hydrozoning, but turf, depending on the species, may either be high water use or low water use. So common Bermuda is probably the lowest used turf that we have for our region. St. Augustine will use more at certain times of year, and if it's in the sun, it will use less in the shade. So we don't generally lump turf into those hydrozones, because also we irrigate it completely separately from the rest of our landscape. So it will depend on the species, whether that species is high water use or low water use. All right, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have today. We'll follow up individually with any unanswered questions. And thank you, Sandy, for a wonderful presentation. I appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise with us today. And thank you to our attendees for participating. Very soon, you'll receive a link to a short survey, and we'd really appreciate it if you filled that out. Your feedback will help to ensure that Extension can continue to offer these types of valuable programs in the future. All registrants will also be sent a link to access the recording of today's session, a list of resources for further study, along with information on how to contact our gardening helpline and how to subscribe to notifications for future seminars in our Drought to Deluge series, as well as other AgriLife Extension programs on horticulture and gardening. Until next time, thank you for joining us, and happy gardening.
Thank you, everyone.